we need to look at it not only, I don't know if you use the word intellectually, but let's say, yeah, intellectually and also in the spiritual way. So I can understand the earthly or let's say intellectual watchfulness, which, using our eyes, using our senses, the five senses that you mentioned. And then so spiritually, um, how do we sort of keep ourselves vigilant spiritually? Is it tuning in to sort of like sensing things that are, that are might be happening? Because how do we do that?
In the first instance, one needs to know what the human personality is. The human personality that manifests in flesh and blood. And because it manifests in flesh and blood, the tools which flesh and blood offers are the so-called five senses here on earth. They are like adapters. But that human personality is of spirit. And the connection between the physical body, which harbors the intellect, the five senses, that connection is the intuitive perception. It is through this intuitive perception that experiences here on earth, which experiences are collected and collated and passed back to the spirit. That channel that is used, which nature has created for that, is the intuitive perception. So the first thing many a personality must do is to learn to use their intuitive perception in the right way. To a large extent, in the work, in the light of truth, the grail message, there are hints, there are lectures that talks of the inner voice, that talks of intuitive perception, which when man focuses on it and understands the way in which nature functions, then one is in a position to adjust one's activities, which activities covers the earthly and also the non-earthly. So in such a way, one is able to become so very alert, not only physically, but intellectually. For that, when it's mentioned intellectually, that is the final manifestation that you see here on earth. But also spiritually, before these manifestations take place on earth, there is also the possibility that these challenges must have been there before they manifest. So at that particular point, for many who are intuitive enough, they would have seen it and prepared for it in such a way they could even advise many others, such that the manifestation may not even take place. These are all in accordance with the laws which govern creation, which govern the worlds of matter, of which man is also subject to. But what happens? These things are ignored. And then when the earthly manifestations take place, you then find many will be running helter-skelter.
Thank you for that, Gregory. You mentioned about the Grail message there, referring people to look at the Grail message. So, dear listeners, if you are interested in getting more information on the Grail message or want to get a copy of the Grail message for yourself, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I spell that www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And you're listening to Bless Radio 1, it's the spiritual discussion program on Tuesday evenings from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The aim is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abrushin. And the topic we're discussing tonight is, I want to wish everybody Happy New Year again. This is linked to that. The topic for tonight is, as this year ends, a new one unfolds. As this year ends, a new one unfolds. And you're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number you can contact us is on our UK number. It is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, going back to the pandemic again, so many things have had to change with people gathering and so on. Or not gathering, being allowed to gather, let's say. And I want to ask really about these lockdown measures that the governments have taken on, and being forced to stop, those who can't work from home, they have been, let's say, pretty much stopped from working, unless they're in the essential sectors, you can say, healthcare and so on. And, it's affected the arts, tourism. I'm actually even forgetting the things, but there's been many, many industries, let's say, affected in that way. And people have, let's say, bowed to that in general. It's like a loss of their freedom in some way. But they said for the sake of the saving lives and preventing the health services being overwhelmed, that has been done. And my question on that is that sacrifice really like a necessary sacrifice? Because, let's say, I'm talking in a way here in the Western countries, in a way, because it was decided that they were going to give them furlough. They're going to give them. Not everybody could support every person, but they would, pay. The government would pay for those who couldn't work. As I said, it wasn't able to apply to every industry or every type of person, but that's what they did. And but unfortunately, it led to many job losses and quite a devastation in some industries. So my question is that justified to limit people's freedom in that way?
In the first instance, the pandemic, the concept that has been brought about by the pandemic has not yet been fully realized. The pandemic is not limited to a tribe or a country. Pandemic is such that people do travel from one country or the other, and the possibility is there that it can be transmitted from one country on the other, and then it starts spreading. The pandemic must be considered like warfare. When there is warfare out there, people must use their senses to guide them from one place to another. Some governments make it mandatory, some others do not make it mandatory. But one should never forget there is out there warfare. So each personality must choose whether they wish to participate in the spreading of this germ or not. Which germ could hit them so very hard and they may lose their physical body. It is the choice of the person to be or not wishing to be. The government can do nothing about that, for there are some who would like to plunge themselves in the paths of this virus. They wish to contract it and hopefully experience it, and who knows, they could also pass on through that experience. So it's not a matter of the government being fair or unfair. What the authorities have made very clear is based on what they know now. And each person is then granted the opportunity to make their own private decision. So it is not right to ask, is it fair that people's freedom have been compromised? When there is danger, when there is warfare, bullets flying here and there, and the advice is don't go to that scenario. If you disobey the advice, fair enough, and you then catch the virus. If they're able to treat you, fair enough. If they cannot treat you, you are on your own. So such a question, as you mentioned, will not be fair upon the whole of the community or of the nation to say, oh, I'm not going to be involved with the virus, so I can do whatever I like. One should not forget, hospital, where many people are taking that have contracted the virus, is of such limited capacity. Again, each person must be vigilant.
Thank you for your answer, Gregory. I was just reflecting on what you were saying, and I was thinking, obviously, some industries and some people lost their jobs, and you mentioned about being this is like a warfare situation, and then it made me think, okay, then if you cannot do what you were doing before, you have to find a new role. And let's say one of the things that happened was this online shopping and deliveries coming along, and then obviously there was a lot of jobs created in that field. I mean, you may not like to be doing that type of work, but obviously if there's a war, you don't think about, oh, I don't like this. This is a need, and you act according to the need. So when you think about it this way, then it's not about a loss of freedom. It's more adapting to the situation. And again, you said of being vigilant. So, yes, unexpected things are happening. And okay, your job is not there now, but you have to do something. So, otherwise you're going to not pay your bills or something. Or those places where the benefits are not there, they have to find some other solution. And so, as people, you hear that a lot, that when one door closes, another one opens. So although it looks like you've lost something, there's an opportunity, another that arises as well. And I guess that just reminds me when you started on earlier in the show about hope, that you always have hope or continuity, as you put it, Gregory, that there's always a continuity, so yes, you were doing this today, and then tomorrow it has to be something new, something different. So thank you for that. Just I want to remind the listeners, this is the Spiritual Discussion Program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdul Sheen. And if you're interested in getting a copy of the Grail message or want some more information, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that. It's www.grail, Grail, message, message.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight is, as this year ends, a new one unfolds. As this year ends, a new one unfolds. And you're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 07939 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, again, continuing with the pandemic sort of theme for tonight, in relation to remembering this year, looking at this year. Another thing that happened is, we called these, teachers and health workers and those essential workers like shopkeepers and so on, heroes suddenly. In the past, we didn't really look at them. We took them for granted. And the other things like sports, where they were considered heroes, let's say, up to this point, they came to a halt. And so suddenly we came to realize something new there, Gregory. So is that, again, like something like a wake-up call for us to really discover that what is really important, rather than, what is in something we just, yes, we enjoy life, whatever it is, entertainment. And I mentioned the sports heroes, but there could be other type of heroes as well, films and actors and so on, such people. But now we come to realize the real heroes, Gregory. Is that also like a wake up for us?
Whatever is necessary for continuity of life on earth should be appreciated. Whatever is of value to the human personality should be respected and ensured that is well utilized. But very sadly, there are some areas of engagement that many just assume is of value. But when examined in accordance with the purpose of man on earth, is not as important. Its value is minimal or non-existent. But many still want to cling to it, it does not add to their spiritual maturity, of which many a person has incarnated here for. Therefore, it means this is an opportunity for many a person to evaluate that which is of value to them spiritually, and that which can be discarded or can just be assumed as meant for trivial entertainment. For we know that teachers are important. They add values to our lives. We also know that the health workers are important and they add values to our life. But many times in the past, they are not well appreciated. They are looked down upon. So to a large extent, the so-called arrival of this virus gives us the opportunity to reflect very carefully that which is useful and that which is not very useful. In the times which we now live, everything must become new. New in the sense that it is of value to the human personality spiritually.
Thank you for that answer, Gregory. You mentioned a lot of things there, like you talked about values and the spiritual, let's say, experience that we are meant to have, in our lives, and really recognizing the true value of things. And then it made me think also that, for example, a lot of people have lost loved ones through COVID and also other reasons, health reasons, let's say. Let's say quite unexpected things, like sometimes somebody lost their mother and the grandmother within weeks of each other. Sort of COVID related, it could be, it may not be, it could be other things, like I said. And then with the restrictions from, lockdown and whatever COVID restrictions we've been having, let's say they limited the numbers for the funeral, or even to be with the loved one when they're coming near to their death. So many things, and it all went online. And, we talk about spiritual experiencing, and then you think, can one really connect through a digital medium? You can see a picture and sound from the Zoom that we're using. Mostly Zoom is people have been using to, connect, you could say, with their families who are, let's say, cut off. And but in these moments of, let's say, death, close, that sort of moments, they've been connecting through technology like this, modern technology. So my question is, Gregory, can people, use this technology, this, let's say, the virtual world, to really connect with people?
Actually, there are many listeners to this program that we are engaged in. Here, we can hear you, or I can hear you, you can hear me, and those listeners can also hear, yet they cannot see us. Is that not a connection? There are others who use the visual part, like you mentioned, who can see what is happening. Although they cannot touch, but through vision, they can also experience. Is that not a connection? The thing is that you make use of what you have to benefit you and to experience. You cannot make use of what you do not have. If a human personality has not developed its intuition to a very fine level, it's unable to make use of the benefits that accrue through personal development of one's intuition. Therefore, whatever is available for the human personality to use, it may do that to be able to some extent experience that which it needs for its maturity.
Thank you for that answer, Gregory. Just it highlights, that we have different senses and we connect them with whatever senses that you're using. You connect it on that level, and yes, other senses you may not be using for whatever reason, but it doesn't mean you can't connect. However, you've mentioned that the intuition, you could say, this being the highest sort of ability, if I can use that way, that word, that we have, which allows us to connect, you could say, in a much higher way, much more. It's hard to think of a word for it really, but it's somehow in a more comprehensive way, I could say, like that, and that's something. If we are not using that, then we are not connecting on that level, and so that is the as you mentioned earlier, that's your spiritual ability. That's what we carry, the intuition. It's our spiritual ability. So in all these pandemic times that we have been going through, I would say that is what has been the biggest missing factor. You're missing your mother or grandmother passing on. You're not okay. You can't be with them physically in the last hours, maybe, or with the funeral. It's not quite as it was before, but social distancing or whatever that we've had to, deal with. But you can still connect in a spiritual way, and that, in a way, that's what we have to. I will say. We need to recognize that that's still there, despite all the limitations of the earthly limitations that we have. I want to sort of change the subject a bit, Gregory, going into what's been happening, let's say, politically as well out there. I say politically in the sense of, I don't consider it really to be political, but because it's human activity really, and it's just somehow the people take sides, and suddenly it becomes, oh, there's one group with this view and another group with another view. But the real thing is the thing I'm thinking about now, Gregory, is there was the killing of George Floyd in America, who was, we know quite famously, was the police man. Well, there were a group of 4 policemen there, but one of them was, kneeling on his neck and wouldn't let him breathe, and he died in that way, a killing, you can say. And it led to a lot of protests. Obviously, it was a black v white, you could say, situation. That's how people saw it, and there was a big uproar, which took over the world, and the people reactions, it seemed to be causing division, showing up division, let's say, that have been there always, but it's now come out really to the surface, and people felt it had to be dealt with now. So it was like a big turning point. So, and that's been let's say, quite a pattern where there's been one group of people who are like overpowering another group of people for long periods of time, and it's like an injustice, and people want to stand up and say, no, that one can't continue anymore. So my question with that, Gregory, is how do we, I know everybody's an individual, and people have different views. How do we come to sort of unity there, or working together in a peaceful way when there's this antagonism going on?
Each personality is an individual. An individual through which the grace of the Lord Almighty has granted an opportunity to mature. In that vein, it must be very clear as to when it is said, thou shalt not kill. That means to deaden the appliances, either to deaden the character or to sort of, in quotes, just to kill a fellow human's personality who, like you, has come to experience and therefore to mature. To stop that person from breathing such that his life is now forfeited. That calls for an uproar for each person who is able to witness that activity, places themselves in place of that particular individual who was treated that way. And in doing that, revulsion comes to the fore, that such should never happen. Such occurrences puts the onus on every individual who was able to hear of it or to have watched it to make a decision to be or not to be. The question becomes very clear. If the roles were reversed, would that have been fair? But the justice of the Lord Almighty cannot be mocked. So those who, in their arrogance, apply such force in order to decimate many, they themselves have sown a seed, which seed they will have to reap in abundance, unless they come to the realization of their error and, in pleading for mercy, change themselves for the better. Otherwise, they will have to experience it in full. Each personality here on earth has come here for a purpose. The purpose of spiritual maturity. And it is very clear, if it were not necessary, then that commandment would not have been given. That is on one side. Taking a look at the teachings of Christ, he made it very clear, love thy neighbor as thyself. Would the perpetrators of such have done that to themselves? These are the questions each personality should ask themselves. For we know that everyone wants to be. We know that people make errors, but at the same time, they must, if possible, be granted the opportunity to make amends. One, the only hope that those who have committed such atrocities be granted an opportunity to redeem themselves. How that will come about lies within the laws of creation through which they themselves came into existence.
Thank you for that answer, Gregory. And the last part of what you said there, which is to make amends, and that was like what happened obviously afterward was there was protests and then people shouting, no peace, no justice, or no justice, no peace, and obviously people calling for the people involved to be arrested, convicted, and so on, sentenced. And then because the protest continued for months, and there was some violence, you could say, from the protesters, and then they say this is where it became political. One side was saying, oh, it's these violent protesters, they need to be dealt with, and almost like the other crime of killing seemed to be either ignored or not considered in this way in one side, and the other side, pushing for no, that they need to. That is not the important point here. It's about the injustice that's happened to this man here, George Floyd, that we're talking about. So that was another division, Gregory, that was happening in how, let's say, somebody in power and how the public. It wasn't just somebody in power, because there was a group of people who seemed to be siding in that way as well. And then there's another group of people, who are looking for a different way of justice. So what I want to say, Gregory, there's the killing, and that is a crime that you have pointed out. And then there's this division of views about how to deal with something. And, it's almost what I want to say, Gregory, is there's some sort of one-sidedness in how people see the situation. What is justice? And is there a way that human beings can really, like the example you said, the killing is so clear that you're stopping someone from breathing is so obvious and clear that everybody should say this is not right. But it seems people take an angle that, they want to focus on this angle, and another person focusing on a different angle. Is there a way, Gregory, that we can come together there?
Of course, there is a very simple way. One should know not to expect from another that which they themselves cannot give. There are some, because of their immaturity, expect a discipline from others, which discipline they themselves are incapable of. Had the police been so well disciplined, such a scenario would not have occurred. And yet, these same police expect a discipline which they themselves lack from others whom they oppress. It's all because they themselves do not understand the laws through which they came into existence. Of course, there will be justice, but the justice which the laws of creation or the laws of nature will mete out in due course is more severe than the one they themselves have meted out to another, who they are supposed to have supported through the responsibilities granted them by the states. Each personality must know that there is responsibility, that when decisions are made, that before too long, one will have to give an account. One is responsible for what he or she has done or has ignored to do. Through their activities, they ignored mercy. They ignored humanness, which humanness is what they are meant to cultivate. Therefore, one can only imagine when the returns come, here or hereafter. It is not a matter of politics. It is not a matter of race. It is not a matter of tribe. It is a matter of the laws of nature, the laws of creation that granted the possibilities of existence and maturity. How have you lived with your neighbor? That is the question.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Dear listeners, I want to remind you you're listening to Bless Radio 1. This is the spiritual discussion program on Tuesday evening from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the grail message by Abrushi. And if you're interested in getting a copy of the grail message or want some more information on the grail message, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight, it is, as this year ends, a new one unfolds. As this year ends, a new one unfolds. So I wish everybody a happy new year. And if you'd like to join us with any questions or comments, the number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 00 44 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And just to remind you, you can listen to our program on Bless Radio 1, the number 1.com, blessradio1.com. And also on YouTube, you can go to youtube.com and then search, if you're listening live, that is, you go in the search box and type in Bless Radio 1, again, the number 1, Bless Radio 1. and then space live stream. That's one word, live stream. That's to listen to us live. After the show the next day, you can hear the recording also on YouTube. You go to youtube.com and then type in the search box, Bless Radio 1, the number 1, and then space grail message, GRAIL message, MESSAGE, and then space the topic of the show, which is, as this year ends, a new one unfolds. Now, Gregory, in this section, for the last half an hour of the show, I want to talk about the celebration of the new year. And in fact, before I just go into that part of it, I want to think about, what we do in a way when the new year is arriving, the older year is coming to an end. And we've been reflecting on the events of this year. So, but in general, is the new year a time for reflection in terms of looking at our mistakes and, working on them? I don't know if I can call it working on, make a resolution to be better in the next year. Is that sort of a point, this coming to New Year's, beginning of the new year, is that like a good point for this type of reflection on your past mistakes?
A reflection is always very helpful, but it doesn't have to be at the end of the year. Like you rightly pointed out, as one year comes to a close, another year commences. One can also use that same premise. As one day comes to a close, another commences. As 1 week comes to a close, another commences. As 1 month comes to a close, another commences. And therefore one comes to 1 year and another opening up. So it could be better if on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and above all, a yearly basis, there is continuous reflection. Continuous reflection to improve on oneself spiritually, improve on one's behavior in such a way that at the end of the year, one does not need to have such a long reflection as to what one was able to achieve or not to achieve. Because the more volitions are put out there, then it becomes more difficult to fulfill all what one has aspired to. Whereas in a humble way, a token for the week, or a token for the day, or for the week, or for the month, turns out to be more manageable than a huge token for the year, which at the end may turn out not to be realizable. It is always good to reflect, but one should do it in a humble and measured way.
Thank you for that. And I just want to say something. Last week's show, we were talking about celebrating Christmas. And we've just been talking about reflecting on the past. And I just want to point out that, let's say I made a mistake in one thing I said in that last show, where Gregory was reflecting on, the birth of Jesus, celebrating Christmas, and we're talking about that event where the three kings came and the shepherds came at the birth of Jesus. They were aware of that event, and who Jesus was. They had been guided by the angels to be aware of what that happening was. And then I also said that it appeared that Joseph and Mary were not really aware of what that big happening was. And I was mistaken in that they did know. They were, I mean, obviously, Mary was told before, and also Joseph. So it's not, I was mistaken on that. So I just want to apologize for that mistake. And I just want to say in general, everything that we say on this show, it is from our best of our understanding, and sometimes we can make a mistake when we say our understanding. So we always ask everybody to check things for themselves. Gregory, I know you've mentioned that many times. Don't take our word for it. Go and check it for yourself. Go and read. We always encourage you to take up the Grail message and examine for yourself. So everything we say, we are human. We can always make a mistake. And so I just want us to always be aware. In anything we say, please don't take our word for it. We're doing our best, but it may be sometimes we make a mistake or like that. So just wanted to point that out. Now, one of the reasons I said that, Gregory, was that the topic last week was celebrating Christmas. So now I want to reflect on celebrating the New Year. And now, let's say again, with the pandemic, let's say in the past, we would celebrate with fireworks and gatherings and so on. Obviously, that is all banned. That's not all cancelled even in the lockdown situation that we are in now. So how should we celebrate? And yes, how should we celebrate this New Year?
One should know that the New Year, so-called, is only a space of time in which one is granted to experience. And therefore, it is good to prepare for it first spiritually. Again, the vigilance, which we mentioned earlier, and the alertness in spirit is key. For precisely, we do not know what may assail us in the new year. But if one is alert, albeit spiritually, the chance is very high we could already pick up, consciously or unconsciously, a sense of what the challenge could be. In that case, one would be prepared, or one would have prepared themselves in the slight recognition of what challenge could be there. And therefore, when it manifests physically, one has been forewarned. To be forewarned is to be forearmed. For you arm yourself to these challenges. That is always the key to one's existence. Above all, one must ensure that one harbors an earnest good volition. One should not forget when the angels came around, they said, peace to men of goodwill, peace to men of good volition. If that is taken very seriously, it only means whenever the opportunity occurs for another cycle, that cycle be for a day or for a week or for a month, but this time for a year, if we follow it very well, then we are likely to have peace. For when you consider what the challenges could be, and you prepare yourself in many different ways, then you will be ready to deal with some of these challenges. It is like many say in sports, before you go in for a competition, which competition you do not know how it's going to manifest, you go practicing and practicing, so that when the time comes, you will not fare badly. So should one harbor a very good and earnest volition, one is preparing oneself for the challenges which will be precipitated physically, and one will be at home and know how to handle it.
Thank you for that, Gregory. In my research about celebrating New Year, because we're talking about, you could say, the Christian New Year, which is obviously connected with Christ, and there's many, let's say, cultures and religions, over thousands and thousands of years have been celebrating their own New Year. And I found out this particular research, let's say, New Year celebration started 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, where they worship the sun god. So, in fact, many people say, oh, these are pagan practices, which, let's say, the monotheistic religions have taken on, just so that they can get the pagans to also, move over to the practice of one belief in one God. It's sort of it's like just like Christmas. So many things have been taken on, even Easter, where there were practices of the people who were, let's say, not originally Christian, and then the Christians came in, and they, in order to convert them or to make them to follow the Christian practices, they adopted some of the pagan practices. So it's apparently this New Year celebration was, let's say, not originally there. Even, let's say, at the time of Jesus, with his apostles, he did not celebrate his birth. Or it was maybe 300 years later, what I seem to have discovered, these type of practices came about. And so just going back to this New Year thing, Gregory, some people or some of these cultures and pagan type peoples, they would, let's say, have the New Year at the time of spring, which is where, birth, you could say, consider birth. And so my point I want to say really is, well, there's so many points really, but one thing first, should we be celebrating? Because some people think, oh, that's a pagan thing. It's not really religious, shouldn't be celebrated, basically. We should just not do it.
First, people will only sort of express themselves at best how they know how to express themselves. The so-called pagan, the attitude towards it, or paganism, has always been wrong. For when many mention paganism, they are assuming that those whose practices do not agree with theirs, or is not as developed as theirs, in quotes, those are the ones they claim to be pagan. What they themselves, in their ignorance, haven't yet realized is that in considering the year, that is the time the earth moves round the sun to form that cycle. And if one takes that one as the basis, that has been going on even before humanity, even before plants were on earth. even before animals came to the earth, not to talk of humanity. So that has always been there. And the so-called pagans, in their recognition of the processes in nature, they have been informed of this revolution. There are some who started observing it in spring. That means from one spring to another spring. There are some who started observing it from maybe winter to winter. In other countries close to the equator, they use the seasons. So these things have always been there. That one is not in a place to appreciate the recognition of others does not mean those people who have been practicing it are wrong. For it must have arisen deep within them in their observations of the processes in nature. So, so-called modern man bringing his own and adjusting things and say we shouldn't practice this. Such statements come out of ignorance and thinking that they are superior to others. For even the case of astronomy, there are many who have been able to observe so much in nature and were able to scribble some things down or pass that knowledge by word of mouth, with their mouth from parents to children. And that had gone on for a long time. So it is best first to reflect, not only intellectually, above all, to reflect very deeply, intuitively. That is the key. So from what has been seen and calculations made, it is now put at the beginning of January. That is, the names were then put there. Other cultures had different names to it. They didn't call it January, just like you have from Mondays to Sundays. That is from one set of culture. Others had different names for it. Even the so-called Bushman that people look down upon nowadays had their own recognitions, which they held on to. That does not make them inferior in their striving to live in accordance with the laws of creation through which they themselves came into existence. Therefore, what counts is to be able to celebrate not the gifts, exchanges, and superficial discussions, to celebrate through their intuition, giving gratitude to Him who made it possible for them to come into existence at all. That is the key to celebration.
Thank you, Gregory. I want to go into another sort of direction now, now talking into the new year itself, and where we find people, astrologers, making predictions about what is to come. I mean, they can't predict exact events, but general direction of things. And so should we take those astrological predictions seriously, Gregory?
It all depends on the foresight. It all depends on the depth of the prediction. Depend on the sight or the perception of whoever was able to make those predictions. one must know that in these matters, there are the occurrence in spiritual spheres or in animistic spheres, many events. And those events, when they will manifest here on earth, are so varied. So much so that the astrologers are unable precisely to say. But all that is immaterial. What counts is the personality himself. If the personality harbors good volition and is vigilant to the events here on earth, and also in his spiritual vigilance is able to perceive what could happen, then that personality is able to make the right connection. Above all, one should know that even the observer has a role to play. But one must stress this. What Christ has said, watch and pray. That is the key. That watchfulness that is able to sense, albeit spiritually, what could happen. At the same time, also watchfulness here on earth. In that mood, one is able to a large extent to minimize the errors. Therefore, one should not rely 100% on what the people who are so-called stargazers or astrologers have mentioned. Others, they only show you the extent to which they can go. Beyond that, they do not know.
Thank you for that. I actually have so many questions I would like to ask on this topic tonight, which is as this year ends and a new one unfolds, and the bit I want to talk about is the new one unfolds. And maybe, Gregory, if you can be brief on this question, because I want to read some text from the Grail message to end the show. I'm thinking about, Gregory, the attitude we should adopt for the new year based on the experiences of this year, where I started with the beginning of the show saying the life is uncertain. And I know you mentioned is only uncertain in a certain, let's say, extent. So what I want to say is the point I want to put now to you is, can we say that from this year that we can learn that what we have learned this year is you go with the flow with this, what is happening. You can't predict exactly, so you can now learn to adapt to the flow of how things are going. Or another way, my motto is one step at a time. Yes.
Sorry, can we make the question brief so that we don't?
Yes. So my question is what can we learn from this year for the coming year of how we can be in our attitude, really?
Two things one may stress, which one has mentioned before. One must maintain an earnest good volition. The second is that of patience and perseverance. With those two, many a challenging events can be handled successfully, which will bring great benefit to the individual.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Yes, listeners, I want to now read something from the Grail message in the Light of Truth by Abdushin. It is just the beginning of the lecture called, Behold, man, how you should wander through this creation, so that the threads of fate will not hinder but further your ascent. I'll just repeat that title. It's Behold, Man, how you should wander through this creation, so that threads of fate will not hinder but further your ascent. Although the message contains everything that is needed to show the way which men must take through creation if they wish to ascend to the luminous heights, no difficulties confronting him, he never succeeds in putting forth powers in order to use them, for a lack of difficulties soon makes him slothful and finally paralyzes his entire activity. Therefore, he pays no attention to what is simple, but as soon as he can, he even distorts everything that is simple into something which is incomprehensible, purely for the purpose of giving himself a hard time to recognize yet again in this distortion just what is right, which remains anchored only in simplicity. Thus man constantly wastes time and energy. This at first sounds as if it was something great, yet it is only a sign of deepest weakness. Just as a weakened body needs stimulants to enable it to carry on its activity, so the human spirit, in order to attain any goal, first needs the incentive of knowing that it must overcome something and thereby exert its strength to do so. Out of this there once came into existence the so-called science, which disdains all that is simple, reaching out to the ridiculous for the sole purpose of excelling others and shining. But it is not only science which has been acting in this manner over a long period, erecting with much trouble a false structure which is supposed to lend an air of greatness to something that in creation is actually inferior, artificial, cramped, and distorted, indeed often hindering. Even from the very beginning, each individual has allowed his earth life to be built up on the wrong basis. It is much too complicated to be healthy.
The time is 8:00 p.m.
It is much too complicated to be healthy and only incites the indolent spirit in its conceit to distinguish itself before others. For it is this aspiration alone which is the true reason for the mutilation and confusion of all naturalness and simplicity by these human spirits. The ambition to excel, the conceit to investigate, and lay down laws from a knowledge that can never really become knowledge as long as man struggles against receiving humbly and simply in devotion to God's magnitude. All this holds him down. I'm going to come to a stop here, listeners, and we've come to the end of the show. Gregory, is there anything you'd like to say to the listeners to end the show?
I wish them a very good new year, 2021.
Thank you for that. Dear listeners, I wish you the same. Really happy and blessed new year, 2021. And just to remind you, if you are interested in knowing about the Grail message or want to get information, or get a copy of the Grail message for yourself, then you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, G-R-A-I-L, message, MESSAGE.com. And thank you for listening to us tonight. I hope you found it informative and uplifting. And we'll be back again as usual next Tuesday in the new year, 2021, with another topic. And we look forward to you joining us then. All the best, everybody. Take care. God bless.